Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. Today's guest has over 20 years of cybersecurity experience and has worked with multiple Fortune 500 companies. Currently the Senior Global AI and Data Protection Lead at Amazon Web Services, Sanjeev Kumar. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, War.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad we were finally able to make this happen. We had to reschedule a few times, but here we are.
No, 100%. I apologize for the last times. I'm sure we'll probably make it up.
It happens. It happens. Life always happens. So, Sanjeev, in your professional opinion, what's the biggest challenge organizations are facing with regard to data security?
Great question. Now, especially when it comes to data security, people are more worried about anything that is more sensitive information, right? If it's a public information, people can access that information easily. However, the moment we start bringing sensitive information like a regulated data, industry compliance data, in our AI activities, in our day-to-day activities, they start getting concerned that one, how is this particular data being consumed? Whom am I sharing this with? Right? If I'm bringing my third parties to process this particular data, what are the type of controls, the standards, the high bar of the security and the data protection, the data security they're going to retain? Will they make a copy of my data? Will they misuse my data? Right? Can they then reprocess this particular data even when I'm the owner of this particular data? How much control would I have? And not but the least, but at any given time, when the data start getting dispersed in multiple locations that either are not approved or we assumed is secured, however, did not meet the standards of the organization that is the data steward or owner of that particular data, then it start becoming a big question. It's as simple as that. If you cannot have visibility into where your data is, you don't know what's happening with it, right? So those are the biggest concerns. And of course, that concerns are legitimate in terms of if anything happens with that particular data from an exposure, from mishandling, deletion, or, anything that consumer never provided any type of consent, there could be regulatory fines. There could be, a lot of lawsuits. And of course, there's a reputation, basically financial risk are higher than just the financial risks. And as you know, financial risks you can still quickly get out of by paying a little bit of the fines, but non-financial risk, which is reputational to regulatories to, moving forward investor risk, moving forward your consumer trust risk, start growing. And when any investor or customer or regulators they start losing trust in your organization because the way you handle their data, it suddenly becomes a challenge for the organization.
Absolutely. And a lot to unpack there, a lot of good nuggets. So kind of going back, you mentioned a lot of things which, kind of in summation, at least from my side, sounds like a lot of understanding, right? Understanding how the data is going to be consumed, used, yada, yada, yada. Any thoughts, any tips for our listeners on how to start, really wrapping your arms around that portion and making sure you've got clear understanding?
Absolutely. So as we consider data security, one of the key aspect that we have to understand. So let's wear a hat of a CISO or chief data officer. What is data for them and for the organization? It's a high value asset, right? Which basically means that I need to really understand that what type of data am I carrying? do I deal with, right? Uh, so whether this is going to be sensitive data, is it intellectual property, is it regulated data, is it something else, right? We need to start classifying that data and start making inventory of that particular data so that I have a full visibility into where my data sets and what exactly that data regulatory requirements will be, or any other sensitive, data control requirements will be. The next piece that I have to probably think of is from a governance standpoint. So data classification, of course, is a part of governance as well, is the ownership and stewardship, right? So you need to establish the accountability for that data. If the business is the owner of that particular data, is business aware how to handle that particular data? With whom can it share? For how long can it share? Is it need to know basis? Or is this something that you can expose your data at any given time to any third parties or internal employees as well? Now, if you think, even there are insider threats, right? So you have to be very careful from that point of view. The other big challenge that I see is that organizations at time feel that, oh, okay, now I have the data. I have a right to keep that particular data. And I have enough controls to secure that particular data. But at the same point of time, there are regulatory requirements, including GDPR, CCPA, DPDP, PIPDA, or multiple global regulatory requirements that clearly state for how long can you retain that data for. If you feel that you can retain the data from beyond, let's say, the specific time period for which that particular data should sit in your organization, you're highly wrong. Because even after that period, if there is an exposure of that particular data, that data happens quite often because organization at time feel that, okay, you know what, because the data has crossed the, the time sensitive time period, I can actually start making use of this particular data anyhow, and let me start putting it in a lower environment with the lower number of controls. But the exposure of that particular data, mishandling of that data, still bring the same regulatory fines and challenges for your organization, for your board, and for, of course, your C-suite. The next piece that you also have to understand is your data processing agreement with your third parties. So I am from one of the service provider. Similarly, there are many customers across the globe. They pick up different service providers. How those service providers are, following the high bar, the standards, the NIST or ISOs or GDPRs or any other regulatory standards across the world to secure that data, you need to have full understanding. You need to have a compliance documentation coming from those service providers as you build your data processing agreements with them. The next piece that I would probably think of, if it's a regulatory data, how do you understand? Let's take an example of a PII. How do you understand that? What level of PII it is? If we just take a GDPR, so GDPR has two type of variants of the data. One is the normal PII. The other one is a sensitive PII. Now, you have to run, there's something called DPIA, along with the risk assessment of your data. So, which is basically a data processing, data privacy impact assessment. So you need to work, when I say you, organizations need to work with their legal team, with the business units, with their, probably the data science teams, and of course, with their any bodies that are facing the regulatory, side of the house to figure out how much could there be an impact if there's a mishandling, if there's a data transfer to a different location where it's not approved. Now, that's something not new. Every single individual, if you probably talk to them about the data security, they should be able to speak with confidence. But there comes another challenge is from a consent management standpoint. So anything to do with the PII, anything to do with the privacy. So consent is one piece. Then, of course, whether, the reason for which you have collected that particular data. And are you processing that data accordingly? The next thing that you have to also think of is incident response, right? So we talked about governance controls. We talked about some of the preventative controls. But do you know what to do if in case there's an exposure of that particular data, right? So you need to have your policies, you need to have your standards in place. And most importantly, from a governance standpoint, you need to also have a couple of additional things if you wear your C-suite hat or a board of director hat, and that is your understanding that if there's an exposure, do I have enough insurance to cover the damages, right, for the organization? Second thing, do I have a PR strategy? Because we are in a situation now, how do we pull back and bring the confidence back in the media to our investors, to our customers? And of course, how do we still stay strong against our competition who could misuse this entire event that may have happened, right?
Yeah, yeah. All great, great tips, and really showcases, I think, maybe the misunderstanding of a lot out there that, oh, data security, data protection's easy, but you just laid out some really, really big things and things that I've seen organizations missed. So with that vein, organizations missing, I want to go back to one of them that you said early on, identifying data ownership and data stewardship. It's kind of a foundational 101 type of thing, in my opinion.
Correct.
But I've talked to a lot of different organizations that kind of miss that piece, right? They go out and buy some tooling, data discovery, whatever. They start to do classification. And when you ask that question about, hey, who owns that data, right? Who's responsible? Who's helping to identify the guidelines around how it should be used or how it shouldn't be used? I get blank stares. What do you mean? So, just honing in for a second on ownership and stewardship, for the organizations that don't have that figured out, do you have any, really quick tips or tricks for them to start thinking about or implementing just to get that facet going?
Absolutely. So ownership of that particular of any data, sensitive information, is a critical piece of the puzzle. And you mentioned about people doing data discovery, doing the inventory of data, identifying, okay, let's put the labels on that particular data, let's put the tags on that particular data. But ownership is a big concern. Now, I'll probably take a little bit of longer route to explain this. Why? 80% of the data that is non-structured data. What does that mean? That we create a PDFs, docx, or any sheets, multiple such things, and majority of the time, that data sits in your handheld devices or your laptops or your, personal drives. And organizations who have not understood the point that when we create that particular data, that needs to stay somewhere in a central location where the moment you tag the data or their automatic tagging that is going on through the tooling, it should immediately send a notification back that, hey, this individual belongs to this particular business unit. The data that is created, does this particular data belongs to this business unit head? So the tagging and classification and inventory, it all works together hand in hand. The other piece to that is the data lineage. Where is data coming from, right? So you might be, as a business, might be picking up the data from different data sources. But the moment you pull that particular data inside your organization as a business unit, you want to process that particular data. Now, either you are a processor of that data or you'll become the owner of that particular data, depending on, what situation you are in. As that lineage happens, are we doing enough data watermarking that, okay, at any given time, no matter who does what type of processing we do, so we change from docx to PDF and send it across anywhere. That ownership information, that tagging information, that labeling information, that's data sourcing, and exactly from which point to another point, the data is moving. You need to have that full understanding. The data ownership is not just about technology. The data ownership requires the policies to be in place from a governance point of view. Reason being that you can tell the business owner that this data belongs to you, but the business owner does nothing if in case the data moves from one business unit to another business unit, which never had an intention to use that particular data. Take an example. Does it happen that we often move the data from one S3 bucket, I'm just taking a simple example, to another S3 bucket that is completely owned by a different business unit? Happens,
All the
right?
time.
Does it happen that, okay, we are running out of space in one data center. Now we have another data center. Let's quickly move to another data center. The data center sits in a different region or country, or the SAN storages, the NAS storages, or even, let's say, cloud environments that belongs to completely a different owner. How does this shift the game? And think about a situation where you move from one storage solution to another storage solution. This storage solution may have all the appropriate controls that a business owner should have had, but then another one, which you used as an interim, never has it, right? So how do you ensure that the movement tags and the labels and the classification of that particular data, along with the watermarking of the data, moves from one place to another? How does it drag those controls to the other place as well? And if it doesn't fit that way, then it should send an alert back to the owners that, hey, your data is going to be at risk. Are you willing to accept that particular risk, or is there any other way to remediate that particular risk in short period of time that we're picking up? Because we never want to have that situation where the temporary suddenly become permanent.
And that never happens, right? That never happens.
Sure.
Really, really good tips there. I think staying with data ownership for a second, I think one of the challenges, one of the many challenges that folks have is actually taking a step back. I feel like data ownership, when you're standing up a new system, creating new data, relatively easy, right? You can define the rules around it. You can make sure the appropriate tags are there. All that's good. I feel like where a lot of organizations really struggle is they've been accumulating data for many, many years. Going to another one of your tips about data retention, maybe they haven't been deleting data, so it's just kind of sitting there. Who knows if it's active, stale, what have you. And they're looking at this ocean, right? This ocean of data. And they're saying, where the heck do I start? Right? They can start doing discovery. That's relatively easy. They can start maybe even doing tagging for classification. That could be relatively easy. But to actually sit down and say, here's my ocean of data. Now, here's my data owners of said data, can be difficult. So with that vein of, a lot of people say, don't boil the ocean, right? Like, where should folks start to, again, just start getting a handle of what is my data ownership real estate?
Now we're getting into weeds, and it's a perfect question for us to expand on. Now, one important thing that you brought up is that ocean of data, right? So data proliferation and having a shadow data. Now, what is shadow data? Basically, we start making copies of the original data, right, from production and start dispersing in different locations, thinking we'll do the testing and whatnot, right? It keeps adding to that particular data ocean that you have. Now, data owners is a easy to understand concept. Okay, so the business owner, senior level execs, right, who are responsible to define policies, classification, whatnot. But are they the one who are handling this on a day-to-day basis? Can they play with the data on a day-to-day basis and tell you that, oh, my data is secure, the quality of that particular data, the accuracy of the data, or am I able to enforce the controls properly? No. They wouldn't be able to, right? So for that point of view, you need to have a responsible day-to-day ownership over there. It's called data stewards, right? So you need to have those data stewards who are doing this day-to-day quality, accuracy, and enforcing of those controls on that particular data that could be, role-based access control, conditional-based access controls, or, just-in-time access and whatnot. Then there is, and of course, these are the individuals who are dealing with, let's say, structured data, non-structured data. But then there comes the IT folks. Now, IT folks are not data-centric people. What they're doing is they're working on infrastructure, storage, security, or monitoring things. But they're the one who will be touching this particular data or seeing or monitoring this information way more than data stewards and owners, right? So how do you define the roles and responsibilities, um, and you split that so that everyone understand that what is required to be done at every single level. Now, I'll take a simple analogy. We say in our security world that security is everyone's responsibility. At AWS, we consider one piece that security is a top responsibility of every work that you do. And that is well accepted, understood concept. But from past 5 to 7 years, from the time when AI has started probably going beyond machine learning to AI to Gen AI to agentic now, data has become the foundation of the success of your organization. It always has been. It's now just at multiple levels and the scale at which you want to grow, right? Having said that, understanding the responsibilities related to the data is now everyone's responsibility. So you gotta bring up, collection and collaboration of understanding that every single individual who deals with the IT systems have to understand how to handle that particular data. Otherwise, if I, a normal IT individual, did not know that this is a sensitive information, I'll ended up exposing and sharing it with some colleague of mine who was never trained to deal with that particular data. What is going to happen? Now the IT security teams are going to jump into the picture, then the business owners are going to jump into the picture, then legal is going to come into the picture, and if in case it is a breach or exposure, then comes the rest of the parties, right? And then comes the reputation. So having said that, it is critical for us to, one, have those custodians fully understand, trained staff, then stewards, making sure that day-to-day, quality checks and exposures, they look into it, and owners stay on top of it on a monthly basis, maybe weekly basis, depending on the sensitive information that you're dealing with. Of course, there are multiple technical controls that you can think of. And now these days, from past, of course, 4 to 5 years, there's a model we call it the zero trust model, right? Which is basically never trust, always verify that who is trying to access what data and why, right? And was there any historical need for any individual or asset? I'm not saying only human, any non-human identity as well. That could be a device, that could be a justice service account, that could be an AI-based accounts that you have created, is trying to access that particular data or process that data, copy that data, delete, alter, whatever. So never trust. So zero trust model has actually become fundamental to protect beyond just, the access levels that we are talking about. And of course, then there comes the real-time policy check. So zero trust does the real-time policy check, but at the same point of time, should there be any push from the top down that, hey, we now have a third party who will have an access to this particular business unit or this particular application or this particular database or this particular data source, on a real-time basis, is there any policy check that is happening that the third party who's making connection to your data sources or your environments are not able to do side privilege escalations or elevations of privileges to go beyond what they were supposed to, or make a copy of something that they were never supposed to deal with, right? So that real-time checks is now beyond and is absolutely important from an ownership standpoint.
Really, really great tips and information for our listeners. You teased it a few times, right? The good old two letters AI, right? And all the various flavors. So obviously, it's part of your role, right? It's something that you definitely deal with on a day to day basis. So everyone's a little AI'd out, I'm sure, but I'm curious. Everything that you've just said, that you've walked us through with regard to data security, all those great tips. Has anything really changed or anything new come into light in today's day and age of all these various AI solutions that every organization is now using or consuming in some way, shape, or form?
Actually, yes. And AI has, like any other technology, this has shifted the market so much towards the left that people have to now think about proactive threat hunting. Yes, threat hunting has always been there, right? People always want to have full hunting exercise, intelligence exercise, deceptive technologies to understand, okay, what's going wrong. But that's when you thought that you had external threats, right? Or sometimes insider threats. The exposure of your applications through APIs, through AI systems, right? And of course, when you're talking about AI models, not only just being trained on specific type of data or logic, it also now, based on agentic capabilities, it talks to multiple other sources or systems through MCPs, right? MCP is being more like a USB dongle or probably additional attachment where any system can come in and read this particular AI system and the data associated with it. It has brought a lot of additional tools. Data poisoning is not new, right? It always used to happen in machine learning. It was well known, but data poisoning or data inference or inference from a model point of view has actually gone way beyond the acceptance level now. What does that mean? If you are running a perfect model that you train based on your, 1P data, which is basically the data that you owned, right? It's not something you picked it up from somewhere and you can absolutely rely on that particular data. If I can poison that particular data on which you're training your model, I can completely move your AI outputs from 100% success rate to probably 30% to 40% success rate, right? And I can push this organization to go into longer cycles to now investigate and find out what do I do there, right? Other piece that is important there, um, we always guide our customers. The first step you should be doing when you're experimenting with your AI technologies or AI applications or models, one, have your probably black box or isolated environment. Okay. Do your experimentation there. Do not expose that particular environment to public, to even your internal systems. If you're picking up the data, start with the synthetic data. Do not use your real data just because you're thinking and trusting a model. I can name tons of models who are mainstream model, the premium models, but remember the zero trust mentality? You have to bring that up even when it comes to any trusted vendor. Vendor can be replaced. Trust cannot be. Right? So once the trust is broken, where your data is basically mishandled by the model because it had some backdoors, someone did not investigate that particular data and did not look into the vulnerabilities related to the models, to the parameters that were used or hyperparameters that were used to result something that you were looking for, it could create a panic in your environment. So always experiment in an isolated environment with your synthetic data. And let's say you have to experiment with your real data. have your environment so logged in with full network segmentation, or probably use a separate AWS accounts with, no way for data exposure to happen outside your organization. Start there to see how the model is working. But now you, I, and everyone else is coming out of the experimentation stage. And there comes the real challenge of ML ops, right? I want to go production. Enough of me telling my board I need more investment because I am experimenting. Board has said you experimented for 2 years. Now show me that this works in the market and take me from a competitive edge point A to point Z. So I go in production. But how do I go in production without even knowing a full understanding of those threat actors, vectors, or without doing a proper threat modeling? So you need to have your threat modelings done. Now you must be thinking, Sanjeev, threat modeling is all technical, but my business risk is not technical. So if I have to go and get into the production, the first thing that I need to act as a business architect and not as a technical architect or a security architect. Threat modeling from a technology standpoint, okay, whether you're using Stride as a threat, model framework, or whether you're using, you want to understand that how any threat or anomalous activities can move forward. So you'll probably use MITRE ATT&CK. But you need to tell the business that what is the risk out there. So you need to start using frameworks like PASTA. I don't know if you have ever heard it. There's an actual word, PASTA framework. It's for the business risk. So you model the entire application in such a way that you tell the business, this is a business risk. This is a financial and a non-financial risk that I'm talking about. Of course, if you're dealing with the sensitive data, just the Stride or MITRE ATT&CK or PASTA is not going to probably give you enough. You need to have capabilities or threat modeling capabilities coming from a framework like Linden, okay, that is dedicated for the PII data. So you need to have full understanding of those threats before you put any control that you feel that has to go because this is an AI system. Always pick up a risk-based approach. It's the risk-based approach that is going to get you on feet when you're in production. It's the risk-based approach that you would keep increasing layer by layer from a control point of view if you do not want to overspend or underspend thinking what you're planning to do. And of course, monitoring is a critical piece. So none of the existing controls are wasted. They still hold the same ground. So if you were trying to look into anomalous activities, malicious activities, trying to access that, okay, who is accessing from inside too much data? Who is trying to delete too much of data? Those still exist. Yes, you need to have full understanding of any sort of identities that AI system is using, what that identity is capable of, bring it to the least privilege, and most importantly, 90% of the organizations fail in least privilege. They feel they have least privilege, but they don't know how to cut into the least privilege. So not RBAC, not attribute-based access control, not historical-based access control. It's a dynamic access control based on behavior.
Oh, all really good stuff. And I like where you went around least privilege, right? That's another term that's not new. It's been around for a very long time. It's kind of been a core tenet of, many security initiatives around identity for a very long time, yet folks still get it very, very wrong. Um, from the onset. And in my experience, it's often been, for lack of better terms, laziness, right? Like, hey, we just need to get this thing out the door. Let's give people sufficient access rights to do all of the things instead of taking the time and effort to say, no, they don't need to do all of the things all of the time. They need to do these things a good portion of the time. And then you brought up another term, just in time, a few times. Hey, elevate just in time when those needs arise. Again, I see a lot of folks in my day to day when I talk that they miss that. They miss those core pieces, especially with AI. Because I feel like the co-pilots, it kind of started with the co-pilots. They really exposed those gaps, especially around data access, where folks just be like, well, we'll leave it open to the company. People aren't going to find it. It's there. They have to search for it. Well, guess what? Co-pilots made it super simple. Just like a Google search, they can go find that data that folks thought was buried and people couldn't get to.
Yep. No, 100%. There is this saying that if I don't know or I don't have a visibility into how things needs to be done, there's no way I can control it. Right? We always say, even in our day-to-day life, hey, if you don't have a control in this situation, stop worrying, right? Give up and let this happen the way it is supposed to. And that mentality, if we apply that within AI systems, that because I don't know how that AI system is going to work. So take an example, right? If I pick up an AI agent, do I know if the AI agent will ever hold my AI policies and always be compliant to it? Do I know that responsible AI principles that I have put from an explainability to, let's say, accountability to robustness of my data and application models? Or if it has to do with the bias assessment, my AI agent, my AI tools will always deal with it. Do I know? I don't know, right? Do I know how my AI system, I know the moment I will give a prompt to Pacific, let's say a Gen AI model, uh, it'll do things behind the scene. I just don't know how, right? So there's no traceability of my request with the actions that were performed. And we think that if my action result is important and I need to get that on time, what I'll end up doing, I'll end up giving free flow access to my AI agent so that AI agent should not fail. If it has to talk to the MCP servers, if it has to go to look into the trusted sources, go do that. If it has to go look into the third-party AI, probably systems beyond that as well, please do that. So because I have no visibility and understanding that actions is going to take or situations it can bring to the table, which are negative, I will always end up giving more access. And that's where 70% of the people sit. Now, let's take an example. Organization ABC picked up 5 critical model from a prime models, which are now well accepted. I'm not going to probably name them, but let's say we picked up the 5 models for our secure SDLC process. Okay. It's not a wild, wild west. So it's not that every developer, every technology guy is going and working with any model out there. But now because your organization has trusted that model, not sure whether they actually evaluated it, whether they looked into the contracts that, okay, if in case there is an exposure, if in case I am in the news for the bad reason because the model was trained with the sensitive information, with the intellectual property, and now that information is being out, and me being the owner of that particular AI system will be responsible for the output of that system, will be held accountable for that particular system, but I made a choice. Now, when you have already picked up your use cases, you have selected your model, and you have trusted in those models, what does it tell your secure SDLC teams, your developer teams, your technology teams, that you can trust that? Can I now pick up the sensitive information, start feeding it to the data model or the model? Shall I start doing that? Because my company trusted it. Or did my company, before it picked up those models, created an AI policy, created an AI use policy, and made it very clear what data can you work with no matter when I'm picking up these models? What can you feed to it? What output could you seek? Which region can you do what type of activities? And if you don't train your teams, you don't have the policies in place, you don't have the risk assessment being done, and clearly define the boundaries. One, for the models, second for the system, but third, critical for your people. Least privilege is not going to work,
Right.
right? Because in the end of the day, you started building the mindset of a trust, and we mistakenly started poking a hole in that particular trust because it's a blind trust. And least privilege requires you to have full understanding on the actions of the model. So how do you trace it? Do you have that full understanding when you do your risk assessment? Do that. Only then your XAI or explainability or interpretability is going to tell you what will happen. And last but not the least, in order to make your least privilege successful, you have to have human in the loop. And last, you need to have your incident response AI policy that should there be a situation, because the incident response in AI is completely different than the AI activities or IT risks that you had in the past. Because now it's at scale and it's a speed that you cannot control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I mean, Sanjeev, we've just been talking for quite a while on a lot of different topics. It's very clear that you have been around the block a time or two in this arena. Again, you're currently the senior global AI and data protection lead at AWS. What was your journey? How did you get to where you are today?
Great question. Um, it's love for technology or passion for technology. I have this mentality of not living in the current. I live in future, and that's something that happened when I got into the cloud computing. I came to the cloud world 17 years back, the year when AWS ever raised their hand and said, "Okay, we are going public cloud," and people used to call me crazy. Oh, no one is going to ever give their data to some other service provider and have them maintain, manage, or retain your data and become a processor of that data. But that was the future and the need of the situation, because everyone knew the reason we don't want to be in data centers, the reason we do not want to be maintaining, managing our own infrastructure, rather than focusing on what matters for the business, what matters for our customers and clients. So living in future is something that I do. 4 years back, when machine learning had already taken a curve that, okay, now it is getting into AI, I felt the need that, okay, now people will be experimenting more and will definitely create situation for themselves. So knowing that what is going to come up, and today what I'm doing is mostly AI security with quantum security. So that's where I am. So I have put myself in a situation that even if something is going to come after 4 years, 5 years down the lane, it is going to be real. You need to understand. It's not about, looking at some independent researchers curve and say, okay, this particular technology is going at the top. No, you have to understand, based on your experience working with your customers, working internally, that what matters and what will matter in the future. So prepare yourself, build your mindset, and start reading, experimenting as much as you can, and see how you shape up your current situation with the future. I hope that makes sense.
That is an amazing way to look at it. I mean, yeah, I'm a sports guy, so to bring that to like sports analogy, it's like soccer was my game. Go to where the ball's gonna be, not where the ball is today. That's the same thing in your mentality of, you're living in the future today. It's your mentality. It's where it's where you're aiming for. And I think that is so smart because there's a lot of folks trying to get into security, right? And they ask, well, what should I do? And you get a lot of those answers of go get some SOC experience, go do this thing. And, some of the things I see people saying is go learn this technology that is actually almost on its way out, right? It's legacy, it's old school. Instead of, again, what you've adopted, think about the future. What's going to be the big thing in 4 years? Start learning it today. So either you can be a subject matter expert or at least know what the heck's going on and can speak the language. That's amazing.
Absolutely. There's a saying that any learning is a good learning. It doesn't matter at which age, what are you trying to learn. Security is a very vague word. People use the word security so often. It's like development, right? So people say, "Oh, I'm a developer," but what exactly do you do? Similarly, security is um, multiple things. Risk, enterprise risk management is security as well, right? Cyber risk is IT risk is security. Security development engineering is security. So there are multiple facets to what you consider security. Now, you talked about, can I go behind CISSP? Can I go behind CISM? Or shall I be probably thinking about future and only AI security? My short answer is, wherever you start, you have to just understand, how does it connect to tomorrow? It is important for you to understand the fundamentals, because fundamentals will stay for another 10 to 20 years. I'm not saying beyond. 10-year itself is too much I'm mentioning, but the speed at which we are going, probably after 5 years, we'll be looking at things very differently. When AGI is going to come into picture, right? So we may not ever talk about MFA. We may never talk about RBAC and whatnot, because it'll become fundamental, right? Today, it's a critical thing. The point is that you link your current study with a CISP or CISM, or, trying to learn something on security monitoring, SIM solutions, product security. Connect tomorrow what you want to do and day after what you want to do. There are a lot of people, passionate people, who would always want to be technical. Great. But then there are people who would want to be technical, highly technical, distinguished engineer, but at the same point of time want to be, I want to go talk to the business and talk about the risks to them. Because eventually, it's the risk that you're trying to mitigate. You're not trying to build a warehouse with tons of security controls. That's not needed. You're trying to find out, my business is this, my client is this, my exposure is this, and this is my risk, and this is how I have to mitigate, and these are the bare minimum controls I need to. So if you're able to go into that journey and understand it, that's the right mindset. Otherwise, you could probably land up getting into that data ocean. Now it's a security ocean, and keep going behind it. Would never be able to, say that I'm done.
Yeah, you're always chasing. Although I think the flip side too is like, no matter what, we should always be learning. And there's a difference, right? There's a difference between chasing and learning. Man, that is amazing. Amazing insight for sure.
If I just put my hand in that uh, red trigger one more time, that what makes sense for me to read today. I was speaking with one of the CEO who has an amazing idea. And he was trying to understand some feedback from me. Sanjeev, what do you think about holomorphic encryption? What do you think about differential privacy that we are currently using for our regulated data? Is there any solution out there in the market that I can probably bring it? Now, we know quantum computing, still we're struggling with up to 150 qubits, right? And we still don't know how we're going to secure what we have as the highest encrypted format. But homomorphic encryption could actually help the world to share their data in an encrypted format without exposing their data. It's an amazing thing to know. The technologies like that, if someone can master it today, is going to be mastered tomorrow, because you will be considered as the one person to go to, because differential privacy today, it's helping us. But moving forward, everyone, they want to use and share their data with each other, but they don't want to expose their data with each other, right? So if the data remains in encrypted format and the format that you want, but still be able to make the best results of tons of data coming from different data sources, as industries, sectors, even government, without anyone exposing their data. That is future, right? So when you learn about technologies, when you learn about tomorrow, see what will make the best sense for your clients, for your business, and go behind it.
Go to where the ball's gonna be, not where it is today. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Sanjeev, if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
The best way is LinkedIn. So that's where I'm mostly active. I have always work with my connections. Anytime they reach out to me, they want to probably talk about their products. They want to talk about what else we can do. Or I have, in fact, being a mentor of approximately 50 plus individuals in schools and colleges. Uh, I'm more than happy to probably do that as well, because it's not about being a mentor. Uh, I learn more from my mentees than I actually teach them, because fresh minds bring fresh ideas that we, probably the gray hair, have never thought about in the past. And now, when we are trying to live in the future, we need the mindset from those fresh bees that bring in your crazy ideas. Let's explore today. Work together. So please feel free to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to work with you guys. I may not have all the answers. I may not have full visibility what is happening across the world, but I'm happy to work with you to explore that more.
Perfect. Well, Sanjeev, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. This has been fantastic.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here and giving me this platform and letting you talk to your audience. And please feel free to reach back should your audience has more questions, clarifications. I am very happy to talk to you again.
Amazing. And big thank you. Big thank you to the audience. Really hope you enjoyed the episode and learned something today. Please tell others in your network to follow and listen. Been another exciting episode. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte scale data protection without the fuss, please visit centra.io. Catch you next time.